All right, I've got a job to do. And that job today consists of back to the 2004 Ford F250 Super Duty. And another issue that I'm dealing with. This 2004, it has the 6.0. And so anybody who's familiar with these trucks over the years knows that the 6.0s, they have had a bunch of issues all by themselves. Ford moved away from that 6.0 pretty quickly. I think that it was only out maybe 4 years before they went to another engine. Went to the 6.4 and then the 6.7. But anyway, in all honesty, for the period of time that I have had this truck, I have not had any of those typical 6.0 issues. This has actually been a very good truck for me. About the only semi-major thing that I really had to deal with was a fuel injector control module I had to replace, which wasn't necessarily all that unusual for these trucks. But as far as the typical 6.0 issues, the head bolts, the oil cooler, and the fuel injectors, all of those things, I've just been very fortunate and I have not had those issues. So some of the things that I have run into personally have just been, pretty much typical maintenance that you're going to come across on just about every vehicle. And so that's something that I think that I'm dealing with here right now. So this truck is not my daily driver. We pretty much use it around our farm. My wife uses it to pull her horse trailer. I have a dump trailer here, so when we do various projects around the farm and we load it up, I'll use it to take it to the dump, and I'm getting pretty close to needing to do that. I have a heavy equipment trailer, and so I also do some, besides my normal job and also taking care of the farm here, I also have some pieces of equipment, a skid steer and a mini excavator, and so I'll do some work on the side with those, and that's primarily what we use this truck for, is just to pull stuff, horse trailer equipment, that kind of thing. I will take it to work occasionally if it's been sitting for a while and neither one of us have been driving it. Then I'll take it to work for a week or two just to run it, get some gas going through it, get the oil churned up in it, make sure everything's running good. But I got in it the other day. It was one of those situations where we hadn't driven the truck in a couple of weeks, and I got in it the other day and it barely started. So what I did was a long time ago, a very good idea to get for one of these trucks, actually any of your vehicles, climb in here, is I purchased a scan gauge. And I already had it pre-programmed for my 6.0. I bought that from Bulletproof Diesel out in Arizona, and it already came programmed for the 6.0, so it was just a plug and play. And so when this thing was very sluggish to start the other day, I thought, let me see what's going on. So I plugged in the scan gauge and I was looking at my voltage. You have all kinds of data that you can program this thing for, but voltage is one of the ones that I want to monitor. And I was looking at that voltage and it was only putting out about 10.5 volts. So I knew I had an issue right then. So I thought, well, let's go ahead and take it up the road a little bit. Let's run it up to normal speed and, see what's going on. And it would fluctuate up to about 11 and a half, and then occasionally it would drop down to around 10, and at one point it dropped below 10. And right then I've got a problem. We're running off the battery at that point, and apparently the alternator was not putting out, or at least it was putting out intermittently, because it would jump up occasionally to about 11 and a half volts occasionally, but it wasn't getting up to 12 and 13 or even 14 like you would see if an alternator was putting out normally. So I have determined that probably what I'm dealing with now is that an alternator needs to be replaced. And so In the period of time that I have had this truck, I've never replaced the alternator. So I bought this truck with a little less than 100,000 miles on it. It has about 172,000, somewhere around in there right now. And I've never replaced the alternator. So that's what I'm going to do on this job here. I am going to go ahead and go after that alternator. And while I'm at it, just to go ahead and reset the clock on everything, I'm going to go ahead and replace both of the batteries too. So let's get in there and let's get after it. Replacing the alternator on a 2004 F250 6.0. Let's do it. All right, being that I'm going to swap out these batteries, let's go ahead and get these terminals off. And swapping out these batteries right now may be overkill because they're not that old. Looks like they're right at about 2.5 years old. So this may be overkill, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, just to kind of reset everything so I know where I'm at in terms of alternator batteries. And we'll go down here on the bottom and get this wedge out of here that holds the battery in place. That's the wedge right there. It just kind of pushes up against the battery and holds it in place. All right, so that battery's free. We'll pull that out. Let's do the other side. All right, we want to get this cable connection off right here. That's a 10 millimeter. All right, get that off. It also has a plug. It just has this snap right here on the back. Okay, I had to put the camera down for just a second because I needed both hands to get the belt loose, and there's a technique to do that. There's a couple different ways. There is actually the tensioner pulley is right there. That's what I have illuminated right there, and that thing rotates. Right down in there a little bit further, there's a pulley where you can put a 1/2-inch drive on it, and you can rotate it to get the tensioner pulley to move, and you can get the belt off that way. Another way that you can do it is you can just grab this belt down there close to this pulley and you can pull on it. And while you're pulling on it, you get your other hand down in there, and there's a little tab that you can pop up, and it'll hold the tensioner pulley in the belt relaxed position. And then you can just pull the belt right off of the alternator. Or if you were changing the belt, that's how you would do it. Or in my case, I guess I just wasn't man enough to be able to pull on that belt and reach down there and do it at the same time. So I used my trusty pry bar. And what I did was I just got in here and I pulled the belt with the pry bar, and I reached down there and I popped that tab up. And so it's very hard to see from this position. I mean, I'm actually illuminating that tab right now. It's in the up lock position right now, so you really can't see it. So it's kind of up and locked. And then later on, when I get this thing all back on, when I pull it again, then that tab will drop out of the way. The tensioner will go back to the normal position. So that's just one of the little deals that you have to do to get this belt off, is you gotta get down there and get that tab into place so you can hold the belt in the slack positions. Now that I got this belt off, this position right here, I can just let it drop down there, but when you do that, that belt is going to get real slack and it has a tendency to start falling off of the pulleys. So what I'm going to do is grab a tie wrap right here, and I'm going to tie wrap this belt in place. And I'm not going to let it drop down there, because if it drops down there and starts falling off of those pulleys, then you're going to have to get down there and you're going to have to try to fish that belt back onto the pulleys again. Not an impossible job, but just to make your life easy, just tie wrap it up here. Don't let that belt drop down there, and it'll make it a lot easier. Take these three off right here, and we will get that alternator off. So let's do that. All right, and I've got all the plugs disconnected. Pull it out. Let's go get another one. All right, I got the new alternator. Put that in place. I actually had to order that, so this is the next day where I'm putting this in. They were able to get it to me by the next morning. I went ahead and got the batteries. I've set them in place at this point. I don't have anything connected right now. We'll just get all these bolts back in, get them tightened up. All right, and I kept the belt up here retained with this tie wrap, as you recall. That's so I could keep the belt where I wanted it and it wouldn't fall down into the recesses of the engine down there. And so you want to look down there and make sure that the belt has stayed on the pulley and that it's not hanging off in some weird way. And then now what I should be able to do is just grab this belt, pull it up, and then that little retaining clip that's holding the tensioner in the belt loose position, what should happen if I pull on that belt, it should fall out of the way and allow everything to tighten back up. So let's see if I can get it to work like that. Yep, there it went. Okay. I don't know if you heard that down there, but you heard that little retainer fall out of the way. So you can see now that what it did is it tightened it right back up. And everything stayed on the pulleys. All right, that's good. The alternator is in. Let's get the battery terminals and everything all put back on, and we should be in business. Okay, so I got everything all back together. Alternator's in, 2 new batteries, got the vehicle cranked. I've got my scan gauge plugged in right now, and you can see right up here in this upper right hand corner that you can see that it's modulating 13.5. It's jumping up to high 13. So I'm looking at voltage right there. I hope you can see that and it's not being drowned out. And then over here, another data point that I like to keep on my scan gauge is this is my FICM main power. So this would be the fuel injector command module. That's the last thing that I changed on it. And you do not want to see this go below, I believe it's 45. That means that you have a bad FICM. So I always make sure that I'm monitoring that. 49 is perfect. And then I have a couple of other data points on here, but this is what I want to see right now. I have an alternator that is putting out, so here I am up around high 13s and 14s. That's what an alternator should be putting out at any given time. So I definitely had an alternator issue, and so it looks like we got it all taken care of. So I'll just go out there and I'll make sure that everything is secure, and that my belt is running true on my pulleys. You would know that pretty quick if it's not. But anyway, it looks like that's what it was. It was an alternator, and just to be safe, I went ahead and put 2 new batteries in it as well. So we'll reset the clock on all of that. So I think we got it. All right, we got that job done. So I took it up the road for just a minute just to run it, make sure everything is doing just fine. Continued to watch that voltage. It's staying right there in the high 13s to 14 volts. That's what you should see coming out of a normal operating alternator. And so it's a good thing I had that scan gauge. You know, you can pretty much figure it out just by looking at what it's doing, but that scan gauge really helps a lot. Like I said, I got mine at Bulletproof Diesel. They're out in Arizona. You can go onto their website. This isn't a promo for them or anything like that. I'm just telling you where I got mine. And I'm really glad that I've had that thing, because I can monitor all kinds of systems on that. And when you have these 6.0s, it's always a good idea to know what you're dealing with. Just in case. I've been very lucky, like I said in the very beginning of this video, that I have not had all of those typical 6.0 issues that are out there that you can potentially have. I just have not had those issues. And I will say this to you, I've always been very, very adamant about using the Ford products on this truck. The oil filter, the fuel filters, when it comes to you know, just all of the name brand things that Ford has for these trucks. I've just always used it because they were designed specifically for this truck. And another thing that I have not done to this truck, and this is very important for people who have these 6.0s, unless you have done all of those upgrades, like the oil cooler, the stronger head bolts, the upgraded fuel injectors, if you've done all of those things already, then you can chip them. You can put programs in them, power programs. But I have not done that to this truck because I have not had any of those issues, and I don't want any of those issues. And so one of the things that happens to these 6.0s is when you put those chips in them, or you put those performance programs in them, that's when your problems start. And you know, I know that there's cool diesel guys out there and they hop these things up, and I think it's cool, man. I mean, I'm a performance guy. I enjoy all that stuff. I love talking trucks and motorcycles and airplanes. I love all that stuff. It's just I've just learned that if you have an original 6.0 and you're not having any of those problems, don't create those problems by putting a chip in it, because you will now start to have those typical 6.0 problems. But anyway, this has been a good truck for me, so we've got that problem fixed. I am now going to take it up and wash it and fuel it up, because Mama is going to be taking her horse trailer out this weekend, and she's going to be playing with all her little horsey friends, and I want her to arrive in style, so I'm going to clean this thing up for her and fuel it up. All right, I'm going to call this job done. On to the next job.